Welcome to the T4TCS podcast and YouTube channel. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and provide your feedback in terms of ideas and topics that you believe are related to T4TCS. We would like to take the time to let our viewers and listeners know that the information discussed here is not to be interpreted as a clinical approach to trauma and psychology. T4TCS was designed to provide insightful information on topics related to post-traumatic growth, finding solutions to somatic healing through a mind and body connection that works for you. It also serves as a platform for members from various communities to learn about positive effects of a trauma-informed approach to self-defense and martial arts training. And now, take the time to enjoy the show. Welcome back, everybody. So for this podcast, thanks for joining us anyways, by the way, guys. Cheers.
Cheers, cheers, cheers.
So we had some pretty awesome success with the first podcast, the intro, and some of the teaser trailers that we have. So thanks everybody for watching, and thanks for some of the comments that we've been getting too. Personal messages. The outcome we think is going to be pretty awesome, and some of the stuff, the feedback that we're getting is identifying the same things. Stuff along the lines is they can't believe nobody's done this before, and it's going to do really positive things for the community out there. So thanks very much. It's only going to get better as it goes along. So one of the things to kind of continue on our last episode, we want to touch on, trauma-informed training in self-defense and martial arts with respect to bullying and the mental health side of things. And we want to touch on two critical points. One of them is not spoken about very much. The other one is, because it's often seen as an outlet and a mechanism to be able to get that sense of agency and that self-control again. It's usually the victims that are seeking out the training in self-defense. But one of the other things too that's not often spoken about is, from a trauma perspective and a mental health perspective, is the same kind of training, but a different approach for the bully, the person who's perpetrating the act. What we don't often address and talk about as much is that person's also harboring some trauma. And they would also benefit from a trauma-informed approach to training in self-defense and martial arts. So first we want to take a look at the benefits for the victim, and then also what the benefits could be for the bully itself, the malicious actor, if we want to call it that. And then we want to go a little bit into identifying the purposes for people coming into training for martial arts. And this is something sort of that was brought up. We were kind of, on the fence about the idea, but we had some interesting conversations before we started that I think do need to be addressed in terms of when somebody's walking into a dojo or a training center, what exactly is the purpose? We talked about it a little bit at the end of our last episode, but we really want to go a little bit deeper in terms of finding that out. And the reason for that is because somebody might have malicious intent when they go into train. So those are the three things that we're kind of walk into today. So I'm hoping for some good feedback. We're all hoping for some good feedback from the listeners and the viewers out there. I'm going to write a nice article too. So give us the feedback, whether you agree or disagree with us. We're open to having a discussion. That's what this is all about. So, let's get into it. What we know about the trauma-informed approach, and you guys have trained more people than I have. Obviously, I'm just starting like I said, I'm dipping my toes in this community. But in terms of training and stuff like that, you guys have dealt with and interacted with many kinds of people. So from a victim's point of view, in a trauma-informed sense, knowing what you know now, like what are we looking for and what are we trying to do and accomplish with that person?
I mean, the first thing is obviously build confidence.
Yeah.
I would say that's the number one. Uh, but you need to get there slowly, because, like I said, it's that person experienced something traumatic, and they're already low on self-esteem. So I would say you basically take your time. Time is sort of a healer, and you take as much time as that person needs.
Yeah.
You don't go at your pace, you go at their pace, and you take as many breaks as possible. I would say that's kind of the simplistic way of looking at it. It's take as much time as you can.
Yeah. So introduce them, make sure that they're comfortable with what's happening, and don't overwhelm them with.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, for example, at Combat Arts, where me and Mark taught, is we actually introduced intro program.
Okay.
Because when someone just starts martial arts from the beginning, and you dump them in a class of 30 people, and they already know a lot, it's overwhelming. It's massively overwhelming. So
Yeah.
the intro classes were about 5 people, and
Okay.
it was a completely separate class where you could actually have one-on-one time with each person.
Right.
Have a little bit of a personal talk, kind of hear the story, see where they're coming from. So that's how you kind of discover, okay, the reasons
Right. Okay.
why this person joining. And it's also not as overwhelming because it's only 5 people in the class, and they get that one-on-one time. So it's a lot easier to make that decision of, you know what, you're good to join a bigger class within a couple of weeks, or, you know what, stick around here for a bit.
Right. Okay.
We'll take care of you here. When you have enough confidence to actually join a bigger class, then we'll do that.
Okay. How'd you find some of the, so when you're doing the intro and stuff like that and you have those discussions, how did you find them during that interaction when you're dealing with somebody that is the victim of bullying? What was that like? How was it? Was it hard for them to speak out and tell you what was actually going on, or could you is that something you can kind of tell?
My approach was not to really be direct.
Right.
When they're ready to tell you, they'll tell you.
Yep.
So I would talk about hobbies, stuff like that, and like,
Okay.
well, what do you do for work? Just to kind of get their kind of around. And eventually, I found that every person just opened up. Once you build a little bit of kind of like a rapport, and people trust you more because you show them all these cool techniques, and they see you genuinely care.
Okay.
And I think that's a big thing. If you fake it, you just ask these questions mechanically, people can see. So you really have to care, and that comes through the conversation. And when they're ready, most of the time they always told me.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, 'cause some people don't want to open up. I can't remember which conversation we were having, but sometimes when you get too direct, too quick, it kind of draws them back, and they don't want to interact.
Yeah, that's why I never asked
Okay.
anything like that. I always ask the question like, so why did you want to join the school and stuff like that? Because it's a very simple question. It doesn't actually ask, well, have you been victim of any,
Right.
right? And a lot of times within that answer, you kind of can see, okay, this was kind of a mediocre answer. You really don't want to give me the real answer yet.
Right. So
Right.
we'll take our time here.
Exactly.
What about yourself, Mark? You have a couple different disciplines in your background too. So from that perspective, there's
So you asked initially, like, knowing what I know now.
Yeah.
Knowing what I would know now, it's not that I would totally change my approach, but I would alter it, because with people who are bullied, they have a low self-esteem for the most part, because they're bullied, right? They have accepted that whoever is their person bullying them has like some kind of power over them, whether it be leverage with social status, a position at work,
Yep.
something like this. Because when we talk about bullying, understand that doesn't just like, let's not have that picture in our head that it's just like a child.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's correct.
People get bullied in their adult life.
Yep.
Some people are bullied so bad in high school or elementary school that it forever follows them, and like they'll get away from their bully. For example, if they're bullied in high school, right? High school years are horrible. They get into college. Usually, the bully becomes a loser in life, and the kids who got bullied usually ends up doing
End
quite
up thriving,
well.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, because the bully is living in a matrix, or they're not seeing outside the matrix, right?
Yeah.
Whereas that kid is going to learn that, oh, you know, there's other people like they're like, their world gets bigger and the bully's world gets smaller.
Yeah.
But they'll have these traumatic experiences in their life, and then when they meet somebody aggressive in the business world, all right, it can then trigger those harbored feelings.
Yeah.
And they fall back into those cycles. And I noticed that with some people. So when I have people who come in that they're bullied, the first thing I try to do is I try to be very, very welcoming. Very like, try to smile, make eye contact, shake their hand. Like I try to, and that's hard for me because I'm a very blunt person and I sometimes come off a certain way, but I am a good-hearted person.
Yeah.
But I just try to, if I know somebody's coming in to take self-defense classes, I always think first, this person's either been attacked or has this kind of problem.
Yeah.
So I make an extra effort. So that's one thing I have to understand. Then I kind of try to watch body language. If the person, like I've had females who come for lessons and they're always closing up their shirt,
Yeah.
or they're closing themselves off, that tells me they're self-conscious. There could be a sexual thing. They're not open to me, which is why they're gesturing and manifesting these closed postures. I'll look for eye contact if I'm talking to them. I have a female client right now that I started training, and she's been training with me for a while. And when I first started training her, while I was giving her instruction or talking to her, she would look everywhere but my eyes.
Mm.
So for me, it's like, okay, I don't believe I'm being intimidating, but there's something about me that's reminding her or making her feel a ways. So I'm going to just soften my tone, and but I noticed it and I marked it, and like now we're at the point where she'll look away, but she's having longer eye contact with me,
Yeah.
which telling me she's getting more and more comfortable.
Yeah.
And as I see progress with her, the other thing too is she wasn't very like aggressive, but such a willingness to learn.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's kind of like you have to kind of wait and see, because if you see somebody has willingness to learn, as an instructor, that excites me, and then I want to give them everything. But sometimes I have to hold off on that because giving them everything might push them away.
True. Yeah.
Right? Because I'm excited. I want to add that realism in it, but it's not time yet. I gotta let it cook. But as you see them start to slowly draw out of them, I'm very quick to congratulate them right away, and make sure that they are aware of that milestone.
Right.
Like, hey, today you were really more aggressive. You're really more. That's what we're looking for. So I try to build up their confidence that way, and really that's all it takes. Like once they are comfortable and you've gained some trust with them, then you can really influence them.
Yeah.
But you just have to be careful, because you have to watch. You have to really watch, and you have to watch body language. That's what I found the most thing. So when I have somebody who come in who's bullied, I don't know the extent of their bullying. I don't know who it was that bullied them. So I just have to watch their body language.
Yeah.
And when I'm talking to them, I try to make a note in my head. I'll also use humor.
Yeah.
To kind of cut tension, and so that this is martial arts, physical. I don't want to make it them feel like it's too serious.
rigid and stuff. Yeah.
Let them feel like you're gonna work here, but we can have fun a little bit, right? When it's time to work, we work, but we can have fun. This is not such a serious place. Make some jokes,
Yep.
and then when I do that, I will notice if they laugh they sneak a smile, when I see that crack, that okay, I can plant my seeds, and I slowly just build that friendship with them.
Yeah.
That's kind of my approach.
Yeah, and so there's 2 points there that both of you brought up too, and is that I can attest to it from when I first started training with you guys. Every time I walked in, or even the first time that I walked in, it was a fist bump and half a hug and stuff like that. Every time we walk into the dojo, it's, hey, good to see you. How you doing? Like, it's a friendly atmosphere, and that's super important. One of the other important notes that I want to make too, and I forgot to touch on it, but you brought it up, is that bullying comes in all shapes and sizes, and it comes at every age. And I say it, and basically it's just, it's that repetitive nature of doing something to somebody that they don't want done to them, and eventually it gets to them, right? And it becomes an issue where they're scared to speak up, and they give in to that person. So that person now has a sense of control over them. And that can happen from a physical perspective, a psychological perspective. That could be in the workplace. There's cyberbullying. There's all kinds of stuff going on right now, and people taking advantage of it to gain a sense of control. So that's just, without getting too much into the weeds there and getting into the minutia, but that's kind of how it is. The other thing, from the victim of the bullying perspective, like you said, you want to restore that sense of agency, that sense of control, but do it nice and slow. How is that, like, what does that progression kind of look like in terms of when do we know to move to the next step? And how do we approach that from, let's just say, a standard, or I shouldn't even say standard, but how do we approach it when they're meeting those milestones and then introducing them to the next level or to more people inside the group, depending on their comfort? Like, what does that look like normally to you guys, or in the past historically?
So there's few ways. I mean, sometimes they'll just tell you straight up. It's like, I really love this. I think I'm ready for the next level.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, for example, what I've done before is I'll bring them to the bigger class, but I'll have a talk with someone in that class who's more experienced, but I trust, and say, I'm going to partner up you with this person.
Okay.
And kind of explain the situation a little bit and say, make sure that person feels welcome. Like I said, yeah, eye contact, softer voice, and kind of slowly introduce them like that through someone I can trust.
Right.
One thing that also I forgot to mention is you gotta remember their name.
Yeah, that's huge when you remember
How
somebody's
many
name.
times I hear, "Hey guy, what's up, guy?" Hey, and I'm like,
bad for that.
and I'm like,
Yellow shorts. Yes.
it's very important.
Yeah.
100%. But I would say sometimes I tell you, and my main method was sometimes just ask, you think you're ready? You want to try this? Or when they express that, yes, absolutely. And it shows in body language. Like Mark said, you got to watch that body language, because when people gain more self-esteem, they don't slouch maybe as much. They're a little chest up. You can see even in the look, like say eye contact, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I always try, if this is like the first time and I'm not quite sure yet, I'll put them in with someone I trust. And then kind of after the class, just ask the person, so how do they do?
Yeah.
And they're kind of give me a summary of what happened. And then I can kind of make my judgment, say, I think you're ready, or maybe you just come back, or stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, still giving them that sense of control. You do it when you're ready to do it.
Absolutely.
I'm going to introduce you to the environment. Up to you to take the step.
Yeah.
Right. And like for you, like you mentioned, you have an example of a person that you're working with, but does that kind of look the same in terms of, because you teach a ton of the self-defense stuff?
Yeah, no.
So,
Jacob, I agree with what he's saying, and the approach that I have, like how he's mentioning, having somebody you trust kind of help them in.
Yeah.
So, for example, we have a student, Mel, and I've had Mel work with another female student that she was kind of hesitant and nervous and stuff like this, right? And I've taught some classes with her, and then what I'll do is, the way I introduce it is like, I asked Mel this one time, I was like, hey Mel, can I have you uki for this person, right?
Yeah.
So now Mel introduces herself, and Mel has some skills, so the other girl sees her as useful, right? But Mel's also friendly.
Yeah.
And so now this person meets Mel, is feeling a little bit comfortable with Mel. I use Mel to partner with her, so this person now gets to use a different body or a different energy during the work, and it gives me a chance to step outside the box, look at the inside, so I can assess her without actually feeling it and being in it. I get to step outside and watch it happen, so I can better critique her. But at the same time, what I'm doing is I'm having this person be used to stepping out of the comfort zone, working with me and working with somebody else. And at the same time, I'm grooming Mel to become a future instructor.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the first thing. And then what happens is now Mel's a familiar face. And when that person shows me or tells me that they're ready to jump in a class, she already has a friend in that class.
Yeah.
And so she'll seek herself to Mel, and Mel will work with her. And then Mel will work with her. And then when I feel comfortable, okay, guys, rotate. But I'll navigate who she should rotate with. I'll put her maybe with another female that's friendly. So now the second class, she knows 2 people. And then it just, honestly, it just takes a life on its own. The other
builds that community that they're looking for.
You know, just my job isn't to control it. The more I found, I was very stressful when I first started teaching, especially in Jeet Kune Do. So Jeet Kune Do, for those who don't know, is Bruce Lee's art. And I consider myself a Jeet Kune Do practitioner above all else, mainly because of the philosophy and the way I arrived at certain conclusions. But what I liked about Jeet Kune Do is it didn't limit itself to one style. And so teaching that is hard because there's a lot of different facets and there's a lot of different groups who think they should be taught a certain way. But when you teach that to a big group of people, they're so diverse in their skills and what they want to learn, it's hard to please everybody.
Yeah.
And it took me a really long time to narrow it down and try to have some success with it. But what I learned was the more I just let it go and just kind of managed as instead of being the facilitator, it would develop itself. It showed me what it wanted, and I just kind of nourished that. Right. But when I tried to control it, it's like water in your hands. The more I squeeze, the more it comes through the cracks.
Yeah.
And so I try to do that with the student. So if I'm training the student, and you know this, I'll get them used to something, and then I monkey wrench it.
Absolutely. Do it all the
time.
And
the reason why, no, because the reason why I do that is because you need to have the common, you need to have that dynamic you cannot ever always trust something forever.
That's right, yeah. There's always going to be a different...
There's always a bump.
Somebody's going to surprise you.
There's always a bump.
Yeah.
So when you get comfortable with something, what I do is I add in that thing maybe we did like 2 classes ago.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing is I'm challenging you to react
on stuff that you taught me 10 months ago or 5 months ago. Right?
And if it comes out, and here's the beauty part, if it comes, like I've been teaching this some knife defense to a particular person, and we kept going through these sequences. We keep going through these sequences. We keep going, and every time we just repeat. I just add a little bit more, just a little, not much, just a little bit, just a different dynamic. Like if they're this far away, you probably want to do this. If they're this close, you're probably gonna have to do this, and this is why. Let's test it. Let's feel it. Understand? Okay, and I'll give that to them, right? And then when they get used to that, and I see that they're developing that, I'll throw in what I taught them a long time ago in the mix. And what happens is they either freeze because they don't know what to do, or it comes out.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a surprise. Like I know some of the stuff that you do with me, it's like a move from, or just a sequence or whatever it is, from a few months back. I didn't expect it. It just came. It's just there. And it's like, okay. And it's kind of like what we were talking about. You think about, and another conversation, that internal narrative starts to go like, did that just happen? Okay, what do I do next? And then it take a moment to pause, and you got to think about what you're going to do next. So I get that.
Yeah.
And then,
but it lets me know what is actually remembered.
And then and same thing with the person, like you're saying, the who's worked with Mel. Now they're comfortable with the community. They're comfortable with getting those small disruptions put into the plan, and then you see the progress, right?
And then those moments where that you monkey wrench them, and they have that moment where that technique comes out of nowhere, that's where I really.
That's a success.
Because I see their shocked moment, like I did that. I'm like, see, it's there. Good. Okay, so now that you're doing that, how do you think then I start to let them know it's possible, what's possible, what they're retaining. Then that's when I start asking them questions, or they start asking questions. And when they start asking questions, that kind of that lets me know where I need to start leading them. Like, well, what would happen if they were to hold me? Well, then you're looking at something else, and like, would you want to experiment that? And that's how that's how I walk through it with them.
Yeah.
I want them to guide it. Like, I'll teach them, but I want them to, with their questions, or sometimes me dropping questions.
Yeah.
Because I really want them to go this way, but they want to go this way, but I think they should go this way. So I just kind of ask them questions that will maybe make them go take a look at it over here. That's how I kind of guide them, and I just build their confidence as they go. And once I have their confidence, once they start doing it, and they're having confidence with it, they're off to the races.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point, and you guys both brought something up, and I kind of want to. There's two subjects before we move on to the next category that I want to point out. You mentioned to like you pair them with somebody else. So one of the things that I in terms of my other background when I was interviewing people or you get into doing an investigation and stuff, was having the humility to recognize that at that time I might not be the right guy. Right. So, whether I'm too close to it or I just had enough and my cup is full and I've had too much of that trauma kindling going on, I have to recognize in order to be efficient and for the sake of the job that I'm doing, to say, look, I'm not the right one. I'm going to hand it off to somebody else. Even doing a crisis intervention is the same thing. So, and that's what I teach with the assist side of things is if you have to get into a crisis intervention moment, yes, let's do it. But there's some times where somebody might call on you that we might have to say, I'm not the right person for you right now. Only because, hey, my battery's not full, or I'm too close to the situation, or I recognize that if I try to get into an interaction with that person, it might not work because it's just not, things don't click, right? So I can imagine it's kind of the same thing in terms of teaching the self-defense to a victim as well of a bullying situation where maybe you've encountered that situation where you're like, it's not like I'm not the right person. I'm going to help facilitate this, but I'm going to pair you with somebody else, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, some,
Because they're going to be
especially,
more comfortable with another person, right? Like, what if it's a female that just doesn't want a male?
and that's what I was to
Right.
say. Sometimes I recognize it was I'm like I'm a guy. It's not that there's anything wrong with me, because I'm a good guy, but she needs a female instructor.
Right.
It happened. I would say almost 100% with women.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you just call one of your friends and say, listen, I
Yeah.
think you're a better choice right now.
Okay.
I've had kind of like the opposite. I had two experiences in my life instructing where I had a female client. I know she had problems.
Okay.
She didn't necessarily tell me like the extent of it. She kind of painted a picture for me. But what happened was through our training, she felt empowered.
Yeah.
And then because of the way I was making her feel, she tried to make passes on me.
Oh, I see.
And it was very awkward, right? Because it also made me worried because you got to understand as a man, if I reject her in a certain way, I don't know how she's going to react.
That's an interesting point to bring up. Yeah, that's true.
And then at the same time, I understood why she was feeling the way she was feeling. But at the same time, I was like, first of all, I'm married. But second of all, like, listen, it's kind of like when somebody goes to a psychologist, they spill their guts, but they feel that closeness with them because this person's nice to them and they're giving them all these positive feelings that they want.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so, they start to have these emotional attachments because they're associating with a good feeling.
Yeah.
And then, it becomes like almost like a needing thing.
Yep. I can see that.
So it became very awkward. It started with like some very like low-key comments that were like jokes but not jokes, and I ignored them. Right? I didn't pay them any mind. I didn't hear it. And then it became things that they would wear to train. And then it would become like questions, not professional questions. They're like, oh, I'm feeling like this, oh, thank you, always making me. And you can start to see like, okay, so that's the other thing too we need to think about is like, you want to be able to help your student, but you can't be everything for them.
Yeah, there's an ethical boundary,
100%.
professionalism, ethics. Yeah, and that's a good point to bring up too. Is that it doesn't matter male, female, wherever it's coming from, but there's limitations and there's a measured expectation from both people.
And so what I learned from that, to your point, is that was a learning lesson for me, and I was able to, cut that person off. And luckily, they weren't stupid, right? They were just like, oh. In fact, I was like, oh, you know what? You're a stand-up guy. Your wife's lucky, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, thank you, because you don't know. Sometimes some people, especially with social media, right? They paint a picture, they say some shit, they want to cause problems. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I learned from that, my takeaway from that was I stopped. Anytime I trained a female, I always make sure there's another person in the room.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing I learned. If I was training them by myself, there was a camera on, stuff like that. But also, when I started to see these flags come up again, and it had happened again,
Yeah.
once I saw that, I would just be like, hey, my schedule's too busy, but you know what? Check this person out.
Yeah.
And that was it, because now I understood, like, first of all, I don't need trauma. I don't need my world getting destroyed for miscommunication. And at the same time, this person is looking for something, and I'm not capable of dealing with what this person has going on because it's spilling out into other things.
Yeah, and sometimes that could be it, and that's an interesting point too, and something that, and I'm not saying that's the reason, but from a trauma's perspective, that could be another response, right? Like you said,
I'm learning
we
that
don't
now.
know what happened prior to them walking in the door, but if that level of comfort is there, it could be another significant response, or them feeling that comfortable with you, or anybody, but that's an underlying issue, right? Or an underlying challenge that there's something else there, or there's something else is coming up. So important thing to notice, and that I just want to make mention that that's an ethical thing. Like, we need to make sure we have trauma-informed trainers, but also people that have a strong ethical background, and that's what they're known for. The professionalism is huge, so make sure you do your research on a place before you go. One of the things too, just the last one that I want to touch on, when you get to the level in the self-defense portion, or you're training with like somebody who's a victim of bullying, will there come a time, I don't know if there has really, will there come a time that this, that you put them in with sparring, and how do you sort of regulate and control that sparring situation if you do put them in there?
Sparring is
like
different for like self-defense though.
Yeah.
It's not really like a sparring per se.
No, for self-defense, I don't. There's no. I would say sparring is more like just resistance training, where like Mark has a suit on, for example, and just gives you more resistance than usual, just to make sure.
Test.
Yeah, pressure test that you can actually do this. But in fighting, it'll be same thing, kind of like when you put them in the advanced class or something. Just put them in with someone that can control their power, doesn't have an ego. So, will have their safety in mind. So most of the time, it'll be someone who's actually very skilled. It's so above them that for them it's so easy that they can just kind of relax and just pop them a couple of times light. But you don't want to put them in with someone who's very close to their skill, because that's when you have problems. When you get, I'm sure you know in jiu-jitsu, you get two egotistical white belts, things break.
And some of the white belt, the lower side is,
And
I
it's
find some
chaos.
is spastic, more trying to prove themselves.
So
and
so you get them against someone who's really advanced.
Yeah.
And then they can just kind of evaluate. So they're still spazzing a little bit and stuff like that. So maybe not. But they're handling themselves really well. And same thing. Introduce them to a couple of other people.
Yeah.
And kind of progress through that. But in self-defense, I would say there's not like you don't really. Yeah.
I like to revisit. I like to revisit something that kind of like represents a scenario that we're in. Like, for example,
Yeah, but that's good for the somatic experience if you take the time to ground them during that, and then regulation. So that's good to kind of go through it and say, we talked about it a bit last time, is to help them recognize that it doesn't have that position, that moment, that that moment in your life doesn't have to be seen as a negative thing anymore, and work through them,
Right. That
like
you
through that,
you can
right?
change what the outcome is going to be. I'll see if I can find the footage after and give it to Jacob. Maybe he can add it at the end of this or something. But when I do the scenario acting, I my job, depending what the scenario is, right?
Yeah.
For example, like I had to be an irate person to this female officer,
Okay.
right? And but she's a tiny little thing. And so me as the scenario actor, I tried that whole bullying thing. Like I was very like
Belligerent and
yeah, I was like, here, pussy, pussy, pussy. You know, like I make sexual comment. Mind you, before this happens, we let them know what we're doing because my job is to simulate what they're actually going to encounter.
yeah,
Because if they can't regulate their emotions, like they cannot let me see me crack them. Because once I crack them, I own them.
yeah,
So sometimes I have to be like really belligerent and rude and shit with the stuff I say.
yeah,
And they have to be able to still hear that and do their job, right? So, when I do that stuff with them, some of them you can see it bothers them right away. And some of them you see that bother them, they have an emotional response, and then you'll see them snap out of it and get back to work.
yeah. Like they sort of swallow it. I remember being in some scenarios where we're doing, I was doing that, and people were being the scenario actors were right in your face,
Oh yeah.
and I remember feeling it, and you feel that the lump in your throat, and you sort of swallow it like a jagged pill. But that's when you get that stoic look in your face, right? And I remember one time that happened to me, and somebody used that change in my emotion and started using that to try and bully me too,
Oh, you're gonna cry? You're gonna yeah.
right? But it wasn't that I just had a more stoic look,
Yeah, just an example.
right? It was just a stone face, and then they started using that to make fun of me, and that it's interesting when the stress responses happen, and that's another whole episode that we're going to talk about later. But I like how you mentioned that you're going to pressure test that, but again,
Yeah, because you're gonna pressure test the technique and the actual physical thing.
yeah,
But you also have to pressure test that emotional too, right? Because
yeah,
you can't just fight people right away. So the next time somebody bullies you, you're not gonna be like, oh, I learned a self-defense class. I'm gonna headbutt this guy in the face when he talks like no. But you have to be able to. I have to test you. You have to defend yourself emotionally too.
yeah, and verbally, right?
Yeah,
Like
and
try
that's what I'm saying. Giving them language, giving them power, and the other thing too is making them feel and understand that they're worth defending.
yeah, that's huge.
Because some
Yeah.
people have been brainwashed so bad, and it's almost now that I think about it, kind of like that fawn state, but like emotionally, like
Yeah, you
might
fall
as
into
well.
that learned
I'm-
helplessness, and it's like, well, if that's what they say, then
Right.
it's got to be true.
So I
right?
want to try to like tap into them in such a way that when I talk to them like that they have the opposite, like they rise to the occasion, they meet it, and they language and they like, show some posturing. And then the supplement to that is when they have the physical ability to back that up, they'll
That's huge.
yeah, that's why I teach my daughters. I'm like, and my daughter was being bullied, and she got slapped in the face, and she had the kids say some really disgusting things to her about me. And my daughter had never, and I think that traumatized her actually. She came home, she didn't cry about the slap, she cried about what the girl said. And my daughter had never heard language like that in her life. And what the girl said was disturbing for my daughter. And I remember, I was like, wow, man, and I had to talk to my daughter, like, listen, some people have a bad home, some people don't have family at home, which touches on our other point, is why bullies bully, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you should think about this. Don't take it personally. She's just trying to hurt you because she's hurting.
Yeah.
Like you go home,
But you're still validating what you're
100%.
Yeah.
I made my daughter know it's not right, but I
Yeah.
try to make her understand. Like at the end of the day, you're the lucky one.
Yeah.
And then my daughter, through the martial arts training that she's receiving, and also my parenting and me showing her love, and then I got her back, she defended herself against the bully. And and now the bully's got her respect, and vice versa. And it's like they're not friends, but the bully doesn't bully anymore.
Well, she's not vulnerable anymore. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the thing that my daughter taught me was like, Daddy, I wasn't afraid to talk because I know that if she hit me, I know what to do now. And for me, that was like,
And that's huge. And that's about the ego we talked about last time. Is like, you could be confronted in the street, and hopefully most of the time I shouldn't even say it like that. There's a lot of stuff that's going on there, and people are unpredictable. But when you have the confidence, like you said, that you can do something, you know how to do something, it's like you do whatever you can to not do it,
100%.
right? And then you have the confidence to say, hey man, it sounds like you're having a bad day, right? A stranger is going to be, or can be, plied into or vulnerable enough that when you start asking them, when they're coming to you with malicious intent, and you say, hey man, you want to just chat? Looks like you're having a bad day, you want to talk about something? Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But you have enough confidence to know that if something goes down, I don't want to do it because I don't want to hurt anybody, or it's just not worth it. And like we talked about it before, there's no winner at the end.
No,
right?
There's too many unknowns.
So, but that's a good point. Now moving into the bully, the person who's doing it. What is not often talked about is that person, yeah, there could be some stuff that they're carrying, some trauma kindling that's going on there. The benefit for somebody that is the bully is the same as the benefit for the person who's the victim, in terms of the somatic release, in terms of the sense of agency, the sense of control. Now, we're also trying to look at balancing that complex issue of control, because some of them might come into a training class and maybe, their parents think it's a good thing, or their guardian think it's a good thing to get that sense of discipline. But if they have that mentality of bullying people, that's something we got to pay attention to in a class and really try to figure out. So now we're not looking at the vulnerability of the person, but now we're looking at who's is this person a potential aggressor? So has something like that ever come to one of your training centers, and have you tried to, was that something you easily recognized? And again, I'm going to go back to knowing what you know now. How can we, this is I know it's a difficult thing, right? Because, we want to give them tools to cope with what they got, but you don't want to overdo it because you don't know what they're going to do with it.
And here's where the
Right.
interclass comes in again.
Yeah.
Because that interclass was kind of a screening for everything. It was not just for
Yeah, good point.
victims of abuse, but also people who might want to learn to hurt other people.
Yeah.
And then you have this tough decision to make, because on one side, that person was probably a victim of bullying themselves, or some kind of abuse in childhood or whenever.
Yeah.
And they're now just acting out. So on one side, you want to help them.
Yeah.
But then you have to consider the safety of other people. So it's a very tricky balance. So for example, I at that point, I was never making that decision. I kind of, talk to the owners and be like, okay, here's what I see.
Yeah.
I can't make that decision. I don't think I'm qualified enough to actually say, should we or should we not?
Yeah.
Because I at that point, I wasn't. I think I would do a better job now, but I was young. So, I really didn't want to make that decision, especially that I knew there were more qualified people in the school that could make it, but I could spot it. And, a lot of times I didn't want to help these people, because you could have these conversations where you could almost get, you see you breaking through.
Yeah.
And then next day they'll be back to where they were. And yeah, it was sometimes heartbreaking, because sometimes you have to just say, listen, I don't think this school is for you, because I don't think you have the right intentions.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that happens very rarely. At least on my end.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a extremely tough decision, because you do want to help that person.
Yeah, and it's a good method to help, but you can only take them so far, right?
Yeah, and in reality, there was a lot of people that had aggression issues that I thought that came out amazing after.
Yeah.
And the most amazing people. from day one to, let's say, 5 years later, and you're like, wow.
Not the same person.
No, you wouldn't even recognize them. The nicest people ever, help other people because they went through this experience and they were the bullies. So they have this incredible understanding what a bully is going through because they experienced it.
Yeah.
I was never a bully, so I wouldn't know. But these guys had this like insight. And a lot of times these guys were like the best guys to kind of like, hey, listen, I got this guy. I'm not sure what to do. And sometimes these people just connect because they're like, listen, I know what you're going through. Because I was you 5 years ago. And sometimes that kind of like cracks the ice. And like, oh, really? Wow. Tell me more.
That's good. So again, pairing them up with somebody who's you have an understanding that can relate to them, and
absolutely. It's just like I said, like if I don't have the answer, my job is to find someone who does.
Right.
I used to be a bully for a little bit, not in the sense where I would like cause people harm and shit like that, but I would use intimidation because I used to be bullied as a kid because my parents are a lot older than most people's parents, and they didn't necessarily have like the Jordans or shit like that.
Yeah.
So I was a kid who was bullied, and I wouldn't do anything because if I did, I was too scared to be called home by the school. I was too scared of the repercussions at home. So I would rather eat shit at school and get it at home. And then one day, I remember my dad being like, because I got like not jumped, like they didn't beat the shit out of me, but like they threw me in a creek, they threw rocks at me and called me shit on my way home and stuff like this. I remember it was very traumatic to me. And my dad came home to see me upset. He's like, "What's going on with you?" And I'm like, "Oh, you know, these kids at school, they did this, this, and this, and this." And my dad's like, "Well, why didn't you do anything bad?" I'm like, "I'm scared. I'm gonna get in trouble." And like my dad said, "Listen, if you mouth off to the teacher and you act like an idiot at school, yeah, you're gonna get slapped. But if you get into a fight at school because these kids are bothering you, he's like, I got your back. Don't worry about what the teacher says." And then after that, it was like open season. I had a hit list that every recess I would go confront somebody.
Right.
Problem is when that happened, I went from the victim to not being a victim.
Right.
And it was like a high for me. And then if I sensed that people were intimidated, I fed off that.
Right.
And so I would put it back on them, right? But I wouldn't do it like for fun. It's like if I seen them being a bully to somebody else, like if I seen them being stupid to somebody else, I would belittle them and berate them. You know, so in my head I was being the good guy, but really I was just
kind of like the anti-hero sort of.
Yeah, but I was being I was doing what they were doing. But for me it was like I'd rather do it than it be done to me. But it got to the point where it's like wherever I went, social, like in high school and stuff, wherever I went, people associated me with shit. Shit was gonna happen.
Okay.
And then it's like people are nervous around you. People don't necessarily want to be around you if you're at a party because, oh, shit's going to happen because of me and my friends that I hung out with because what I attracted what I was.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? So but the thing is, I wasn't really that person. For me, it was a defense mechanism from my trauma.
It's sort of that wall that you put up.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I didn't like who I was anymore. And then I got in trouble and I got arrested and things happened and then it came to a point where like I had to change my life. And that's when I started training martial arts and then I realized I wasn't tough. Like I had fought a lot, but I fought a lot of people who they weren't trained.
That's right, yeah.
You know what I mean? And when you start going to a gym, and then I had some really eye-opening experiences in the gym where it was traumatizing again. And then it changed what kind of gym I wanted to be at. Luckily I found combat because they were able to bring me back.
Yeah.
Right? And too bad I didn't get them earlier. But all that to say is I was a bully for a little while. And
yeah.
You know, I understand that it's really because it's coming from a place of hurt.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, but to Jacob's point,
how do you police that? And how do you know if nobody's going to tell you?
Well, I mean, for example, combat had a guy. I was teaching at combat every Saturday, right? I don't teach there as often as I used to. Not because I don't want to. I love that place. It's forever home. Just, you know, I can't do it, right? But I remember they had this one gentleman, and he wanted to fight. Straight, just like that. He wanted to fight. He had issues. And in every class he went to, He was over physical to the point where he started hurting people. And I remember he was in my class one time and he was going hard on people. And so then I had to work with him and I gave it to him back. But the problem is even though I gave it to him, it's like he liked it. So I think he had a real mental issue. And I'm like, you're not, listen, if you want to fight, do the fighter's class. If you want to spar with me, no problem. But you can't be in this class because there are people here of all levels and you're going to hurt somebody. And then he went into the Muay Thai. And he got tuned up by some of the fighters there, but it's like he didn't care. And he was still reckless. And they got to the point where like he was willing to take the beating, but like some of these guys were training for fights. They can't be sparring this guy because they have to make sure they're not injured. And then he got pushed out into the jiu-jitsu. And these guys were like choking him out, or they like put him in a submission.
And he wouldn't let go.
And he wouldn't let go, and he was still acting. And they're like, bro, I'm going to break your, like. So it got to the point where they tried. They tried to talk to him. They tried, like Dave tried to talk to him. Everybody tried to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
I have a pretty good idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It got to the point where they're like, hey, you know what? You got to go. Because some people, and it's not their fault because I don't know what they went through, but there's some people, like you can help people, but they have to willing to let you help them.
Yeah, sometimes that is like, it can be attributed to like a coping act too, right? And that's just an outlet for them. And sometimes it's just, it's an uncontrollable thing. Like I was kind of in between the two of you, like when I was back in high school and stuff like that, and even a little bit after. And it was like, I was made fun of. So there's the psychological side of things. I was a big guy. And so again, like we talked about it a little bit, like my outlet was to go into these traditional jiu-jitsu style. And I did, and I loved it, and I stayed with it. But I was afraid to do anything to defend myself because I've always been this person that just, I didn't want to cause any trouble. So I had no malicious intent when I took martial arts whatsoever. But the odd time when I actually did do something in defense of myself or somebody else, that's not what people saw. They saw the one moment that I reacted. And so it further puts you down that hole of like, I'm not going to do anything anymore. And I'm just going to hold this stuff in. And then...
Which is worse.
Which is worse. Yes. You have the ability to do it. You want to defend yourself. You know it's the right thing to do. You do it and you get in trouble for it because they didn't see what happened prior to it. And so, you know, fast forward now, and I try to help people understand that too, like with kids, is like, where have we gone so far that it's a bad thing for somebody to defend themselves? It's not a bad thing. I've spoken to principals actually on some occasions where they have the same mindset. They're in agreement. And it's like, no, if there's something going on and a child defends themselves and they're in the right, violence, yes, we want to stay away from it. But if it got to the point where a human being felt threatened enough to use physical force to defend themselves, that's a natural response. So why are we trying to work people out of that? It's counterintuitive.
It is.
Right? And then so when you give somebody shit for defending themselves for the right reasons, you're further exacerbating the trauma that they have on. And I remember a particular person, actually a couple of people, and you know, it was fun. It was great to be away from them for a few years because I did some co-op programs. And so for 2 years in a row, I didn't have to be in school for the last 2 semesters. It was awesome. But then when I went back, like I was a new person. When I went back and started interacting with those same people again, it was a quick reaction all over again. I choked up. I didn't want to be around them. I couldn't see them. And it made my blood boil.
Yep.
So it didn't matter how much time I had in between seeing them. It just sucked.
And you know what? I've experienced that. There are certain people that have done things to you in the past, and you won't see them for a long time.
Years.
And you've gone through this journey, and you're a stronger person now. You're a different person now. But there's some type of hold that they have over you when you're around them again that they can bring you right back to that feeling.
And they know, it's because they know how to get to it, right?
Yeah,
and it sucks.
I've had that, with me in my situation, they had that power, and then they said something that made me snap, and I I took control of the situation and I let them know, like, no, this isn't happening anymore.
Yeah.
And I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to make them understand that, and they folded. And I'm telling you, it was like taking a emotional shit. I
Yeah.
felt so relieved.
You get that shiver?
No, I just like, oh, that felt good. Why didn't I do that years ago?
Yeah. No, I had that too, and it was, and the reason I say it is because there was a messaging interaction that I had with an individual not long ago, and it was one of those guys that used to be like, you know, why are you doing this? You should do that. Oh, you're doing this, and he'd always make fun of you for doing something, even though it was a good thing.
Because they're not doing it.
I hate those people.
And it just, the messaging, and I was giving this person the benefit that it was great to reconnect, but then it just started getting worse during the messages. And I said, look, I don't know what you're expecting from this, you know, this newfound relationship or what you're trying to establish with the way you're speaking with me. It's not going to happen. Sorry, dude. If this is what you want, I'm not into it. If you're in it for the reasons that I wanted to reconnect with you for and how we started our conversation, cool, let's do it. I'm game for that. And then I never heard from them ever again. So I'm cool. I'm cool with that. But I think the fact that I finally said something to this person and drew the line in the sand,
That's what it is.
they didn't have that control anymore, right? I wasn't giving in. I wasn't
took it.
agreeing with them. And so
That line in the sand is huge. And that, going back to the school, when you see somebody in class subtly making fun of somebody, or oh my gosh, see the way that guy kicks, or blah 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 blah, draw that line in the sand right there. That shit ain't not happening here.
yeah.
You know, and if you do that right away, especially if you call them out in front of the group, their power is gone immediately. Immediately. You know, because the bully does not want that attention to them.
Yeah, and I mean, so there's that, and then there's nothing wrong with going up afterwards and saying, hey man, like, I just wanted you to know, this is not where I'm coming from a good place.
Yeah.
Whatever's going on with you, if there's something going on, if you want to chat, let's do it. And that's what I mean about the message, and I'm not going to name anybody. It's just the messaging that was going on, and that's what I thought what was happening. It was
Subtle.
a really good conversation that we were going to have that was going to, you know, put the flame out, but it didn't go there, right? So they sort of, you know, they suckered me into it, and so to me, it's like, hey man, I tried. I know there's some stuff going on. You opened up to me, but if you want to continue this way, I'm not your guy. It's not for me.
And that's healthy.
So, but I like your story, and that's a good one too. So it gets different perspectives moving. So just to close up on that, and then segue into the next one, which I think is an incredibly important topic. The bullies are going through trauma. The people who are committing the malicious activity are going through some tough stuff. So when it comes down to it, let's just have a conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
Right? Like, let's figure that out, because if we, like you said, if you draw the line in the sand, you have a conversation, you're open to listening, regardless of what's going on, I mean, you could do some great stuff. I mean, what if we're parents to somebody that goes to a school and is a bully? Right?
You
I gotta
nip
think
that
of that
shit.
from that's the like.
Sometimes you don't even know.
But that's the thing, is that
Yeah.
we have to
Not
look
Milo,
at this.
Billy.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's
Yeah.
that accountability thing, right? And I think that that's an
Yeah.
important thing to have that conversation. And we're talking about the school side of things right now, and I think it's important because it's coming to the school year. But this happens in the workplace too. But the accountability side of things, if we can't recognize that and be open to having a conversation and hearing the hard stuff, and having an inviting relationship with our, you know, with children, to say, you know, it doesn't matter what happens, you can still talk to me, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's a huge thing, right? So, like you said, sometimes you didn't want to talk because you were afraid it was going to happen to you at home more than you were than anywhere else.
Yeah.
There's a limit to that, though, right?
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
I know there's an accountability thing. If I get in trouble, I'm going to get in trouble.
Yeah, and it made me feel like I had to endure the abuse.
Right. But if I have an open relationship and my parents are open to hearing my side of the story, then I'm going to be less apt to hold this stuff in.
And
Right.
take less trauma.
100%. We're going to carry much less of that stuff. So I think that's a big point to get across for anybody who's listening here, and to have those, make sure that we can be open and have the trauma-informed conversation, manage it properly, and be open to listening to people. that goes for people at work too,
And
right?
and just to put a plug out there, just because what we're doing for T4TCS is we're looking at this, but for me, in my perspective, is like we're looking at this for like more for, at least for me, for adults.
100%, yeah.
But
Can
I-
we work with somebody else?
But I want to shout out a friend of mine, Crew Dave Edwards, who has a program called Bully Be Gone, and he's gone to different schools, and he really focuses on the youth. And this guy, honestly, I've had the pleasure of knowing this guy since 2007. Crew Jacobs known him for probably longer. This
Yeah.
guy has been investing his resource and time into the youth with some brilliant programs. And you know, I would love to actually have him on the show sometime.
If he's listening,
yeah,
yeah.
100%. And even have him like be, like he pretty much he's doing what we're wanting to do. He's been doing this for the youth at some capacities, and been in schools and stuff like that. And he's got a really good insight onto what kids go through, especially through the social media, which I never had that problem.
Yeah, none of
And
us
I
did,
can't
don't
even
None of us,
imagine.
yeah, no.
And that's why I don't have, like my daughter, she's not on any social platform, and nor will she be for a very long time, because I just don't want to open up that opportunity of, if she is bullied, it doesn't need to be on social. Because at least when you were a kid, you could go home, like say you had a good household, say you were lucky enough to have a good household, and you had hard times at school. When you came home, you had love. It was shut off. You could do some healing and repair there. You can get some you can get some re-encouragement and prepare for the next day's battle. These kids now, they're going home. It doesn't stop.
That's
Did you
right.
see what he posted? Did you see what he said? Oh my God, that video from his school. Like, this is constant berating of people's psychology. And if you are not diligent in your own self-care and awareness and having a support system and the epigenetic, you know, training, physical and stuff like that, to release that kind of energy and empower yourself, I mean, this is how kids and people I know that we know
Yep.
have lost their children because of this.
100%. And
It's horrible.
That could be an interesting plug-in for another topic that we have. And just to touch on that, the exploitation is not just the mental health side of things in the social media, but it's when somebody begins to, when people post about how they're feeling, especially young children, the exploitation from somebody who's got ill intent on that post will begin to groom. That's another discussion and another topic altogether. But that is something that is incredibly important for everybody to know. Social media, like once you put something on the web, it's out there and it's never going to go away. People will find it.
At some capacity, yeah.
So yeah, great point. And people they start to rely on that as a coping mech, and to get that sense of community, because that's what the social media is giving you.
And it turns on you like a dime.
Yeah, but I
Not
think
only
it's
that, but if
more-
you don't get all the likes and all this other stuff, so there's and then
Dopamine that
bullies, the
comes with that.
cyberbullying that comes with that too, and again, exploitation based on there's a lot there. I think that's a whole other 5 segments, right? But good points. Did you have anything else to add on that one? So
No, I was going to say it's an addiction.
absolutely, yeah.
It's really bad, because you get bullied on a platform you're addicted to,
And
which is like,
That's a horrible sight.
But I
that's
think-
what I'm saying.
And the horrible part about it, and people have posted about this a lot too, and then we'll segue into the next the next piece that we really want to touch on, is it gave, like, physically, we just talked about it. I could draw the line in the sand. People, you don't need guts to do it on social media.
I know.
Right?
Keyboard warriors everywhere,
Right.
because it's
They-
not personal. It's not in your face.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That fight will start on social media almost instantly, because there's no line in the sand being drawn, and they don't care. There's no physical engagement there.
Yeah.
So, again, that could be a whole other show on
We'll
on
get
its
back
own.
to that, because it's
Yeah,
hours
stay
and hours
tuned for
of-
that one. The other piece, really important, and I think it plugs into the bullying side of things, and then is a segue for multiple other episodes. The purpose behind martial arts altogether. The purpose of the training, the community in martial arts. And first of all, understanding what we talked about in the first episode. What is the intent? Are they going in for competition? Are they going in for self-defense? Is this person going in there because they've been bullied, or they're doing it for other grounding reasons, or are they coming in with malicious intent? Understanding where somebody wants to go with what they're coming into and the purpose of their training, I think, is really important. It's no secret that I do martial arts, but I'm not flaunting it. I just talk about it a little bit, and that's why we're on this podcast. That's why I have it here. There's always these arguments, which one's better? Which one's, gonna beat the other one? But then they gets into these arguments where people are putting others down because of it, and it's become almost infectious. But then there's people taking things out of context and using gimmicks, giving others a false sense of security. Sometimes it's harmful. Let's say, for example, somebody's actually looking for a self-defense training program, but then they go out and they get a false sense of security, or they're giving people harmful tactics that have ill intent to begin with. There's a lot going on there, and I want to touch base on that in terms of what we're talking about and how much, there's good, there's the bad, there's the ugly, and I think what we're kind of walking into now is the ugly side of things, where people getting the false sense of security, and also getting harmful tactics being taught to them by, I would say, some instructors that have sort of fallen off the ethical pedestal. And again, you guys know more of this than I do, but I've seen it ever since we started doing our thing. I've seen, because we're talking about it right now, because I search it on the web, anything that I end up going to in terms of scrolling, Facebook is listening, Meta's listening. So what pops up on my feed is all these people with these magic pills in martial arts that will save the world.
Yeah, it used to be the martial artist, the fighter. And now we have this third dynamic, and it's the martial artist, the fighter, and the influencer. And the influencer, sometimes they are a bit of a martial artist.
And I want to keep this one a little bit PG too. So
yeah, sometimes they're a little bit of a fighter. Look, at the end of the day,
yeah,
you can teach. You have to understand, as a martial artist, there are moral and ethical codes. This stuff has been handed down for hundreds of years, and originally the origin of martial arts is to protect your homeland and your loved ones, your tribe, and your resources. It's supposed to come from a place of love, and it was handed down from father to son in order to keep that lineage alive. And when you had a neighboring army who was just as formidable, and there's too much death to settle that, what do? You marry them. There's a union of marriage. And now their secrets are our secrets are their secrets, our empire is bigger, and now we have a bigger resource pool.
Yeah.
Today, it's like, let me just teach whatever's popular. Let me teach the flashy thing. Let me teach. And the thing is when we start getting caught up on likes, just like, kids do on social, they get caught up on likes, and they get caught up on like, oh, I can make money doing this. Oh, what? There's an AI program that tells me what's the catchiest shit to sell. Let me just do that. And we start thinking, being hyper focused on success, but to what cost?
In terms of monetary value.
Right. What cost? We're not even, like, I wasn't even really thinking about it to the depths of trauma-informed training, where people are coming in, somebody got a knife pulled on him in a parking lot, and now they want to come learn knife defense, and they come to my class, and the half-hour warm-up is stabbing each other with knives. Or somebody, has some real anger issues, and they're a beta male, and they're not really confident in physical altercations, so they want to learn something like knife for equalizer. And now when that guy gets put under severe stress, instead of fighting or running away, he's going to go to his knife. We have to be responsible and mature advocates of the martial arts and not just give it away. We didn't just have it given to us. We earned it. If you're worth your merit, you earned it. Right? So now what? You have to make them earn it. Because if you just give it at a price, the art gets watered down, the moral and ethical values get dropped, and it becomes nothing. And I love martial arts too much, and I have seen it do too much in my life and in other people's lives to cheapen it that way. And you're giving tools to bad guys without vetting them first is reckless and irresponsible. And if somebody ever gets killed, some politician or mayor gets stabbed to death, and they take that guy to court and they realize he has a mental history, and like, well, you know, what possessed you to do this? Well, I learned how to do this at a seminar and I wanted to try it. What do you think that does to martial arts or the laws and litigations around what we're allowed to share now? Are you going to take accountability for the guy who looks cool on social media and say, yeah, I taught him? Are you also going to take accountability for the guy who ended up killing somebody? You know, this has happened in the past, and I'm not going to name names, but this has happened in the past with a very highly skilled martial artists group, and it was the ruin of them. And, you know, I just think people need to stop and think and be a little bit more, have a little bit more discernment on if they're doing something for the betterment of their community or the betterment for their name and monetary gain. Did I do that nicely?
No, yeah, no, that's...
No, that was
I
as
don't
PG as it
disagree.
can go.
Like we talked about it earlier too, because I find it's very important to talk about. My intention when I first got back into it is I wanted to go to school to learn. When I was graded and promoted, or there was times where I wasn't even told that I was going to be graded. It was just a surprise. But I wanted to know that I did it and I earned that rank, right? And that was what I said to the instructors before I even started training. I don't want to come here and just be here. I want to be pushed. Kind of like what I do, like I said that I do when we're at when we're training, when we're sparring and rolling on the ground. I purposely want to be in a position where I feel uncomfortable so that I have to earn my way out, because that's what it's about. And it's about learning. The lifelong practitioner is not just learning the martial art and learning the spirituality of it and learning the value of it, but you're also learning other things to keep your mind occupied so that you grow physically and mentally as a person. And that's where I see the value there. And I completely agree in terms of when you choose to give somebody tools to do something that can be harmful but can also be good, you have to be able to understand the consequences behind what you're doing. And if that person gives you any sort of indication that they're going to use it for the wrong reasons,
don't give it to them.
You have to make that call. Because, the bad things can happen. And we're in the age of social media. So connecting that person with the person who trained them is not going to be difficult if it comes down to a legal situation. It really isn't. I've done social media investigations. And when you go through the dark web and you start to you create they call them sock puppets, and I'm just giving some stuff away here. When you create these accounts and you start looking at connections between people's social media's accounts and you want to find where the root was, it's not hard. So just imagine from a legal perspective, if something terrible was to happen, police have way more resources for it, and they're going to connect the dots pretty friggin' quick. And again, like you said, overall, it just puts martial arts in some cases in the bad light.
Yeah.
And it's horrible, and it's disheartening for people that truly love it and are in it for the right reason. So I don't know what your thoughts on it, but
Well, I think Mark said pretty much everything. But yeah, no, I think the sense of responsibility is very important.
yeah,
And that's why you always have to stay very connected to your students. That if you notice red flags, you can't give them any more knowledge, because sometimes people can fool you for a while. People are pretty good in being your, hey buddy, you're awesome in this and that, right? And just to get things out of you.
yeah.
Right? And then
And
they're
for
like,
anybody who wants to know how to do that and pick up on those red flags, read The Dark Triad. It's a book, really great book. I'll plug it in.
It's a good book.
Yeah.
But yeah, like he's saying, somebody could fool you for years.
Yeah. And then take everything you got and then call it their own. Hey, I did this. No, you didn't.
Yeah. They're willing to take the credit when it's good, but when it turns out to be something bad, they blame you for
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
And so, I hate to say it, but sometimes you don't see it until it's too late. So I don't want to say that it's always the instructor's fault, because some people are so good in fooling people
Yeah.
that you cannot tell. And at that point, you have to be, you have to make that decision of, well, technically it's not instructor's fault because this guy was so good that none of us could tell. You know what I mean?
But sometimes what that does is it goes back into the whole mental thing. Is like, they had me fooled. And then you're scared to share your knowledge with other people again.
It's not
that
just-
can do really, the knowledge that you're sharing, that person used it for the wrong reasons. And you really want to share that knowledge again because you know it's going to do some good, but that person had you so fooled and you don't know who to pick.
It's not only just about the sharing thing. I'm not going to say names, and I really don't want to get into this too much.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I was close friends and training partners with somebody for about 5 years before they were arrested for sexual interaction with a minor.
Right.
And the fact that I couldn't pick that up bothered me for a very long time. The fact that this person was around me and we trained together and stuff like that, and I could not pick that up, really had me rethinking my capabilities of reading people and how I interact with people and how I can trust with people. And it turned me off
Training.
from training for a very long time.
That's tough.
It's
And
very tough.
only now have I come back to the art that was stifled. But it took a long time, and it took some great people, and you know who you are. I don't really want to say too much because I don't want to.
No, you
Anyway,
don't have to. That's good.
But Boomer is one person, and some mutual friends, and some really good people. They didn't give up on me, and they have me enjoying it again. But that's one thing too. It's not just about like plagiarism or theft of intellectual property. It's like it's trust and yeah, I would say trust.
Yeah.
A sense of trust, and then you can't trust your own judgment towards other people anymore because you've been fooled, and it can have an effect on you. So that's the other thing too. Is like
yeah, you end up pushing others away too, right? Yeah.
right, and it's just like it's not an easy thing, but yeah, 100%. I've been the victim of that. I've been the one who got fooled, and makes you feel stupid. But understand, it took me a minute, but understand it's like there's no possible way I would have known. And some people are just really good at being a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
But lesson learned, and you got to grow through it. You have to grow through it, not just go through it.
Yeah. And you and I were talking about it. We kind of talked about it a little bit here before. When you learn martial arts, and you talk to me about it all the time. When you're learning the basics on things, you learn the basics. You learn the techniques. You learn the stance. It's like when you learn to drive. You learn to drive 10 and 2. That's how you have to learn to pass to get to a certain level. Eventually, when you doesn't matter what martial art you learn, you develop your own little style of applying the basics. Despite what anybody thinks out there, nobody has a patent on martial arts. Nobody has a patent on jiu-jitsu. Nobody has a patent on karate. You don't own it.
Well, the ones that did are dead.
The ones that, and that's
Long
some
time.
of them it's thousands of years ago, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody has a patent on this stuff. It's not yours. It's not mine. It doesn't belong to anybody. You make it your own, by applying your style and by applying your beliefs behind it. That's where it comes from. And I think that's the important thing to recognize when, in the genuine side of people, when we're doing this stuff, is that we don't own this. We're just the practitioners and the students, and we're always going to be students.
Yeah. Try to leave it better than when you found it.
Right? If it's more practical nowadays by developing a new technique, and sometimes you think it's a new technique and it's like you go do some research, wow, that's not that novel. Somebody did it like 100 years ago. They just haven't done it since.
And you're going to find
Right.
that times are going to dictate how the martial arts is taught. In times of peace, we have time to get silly and make it flashy and look how cool I am on Instagram. When the stores close and there's no food and people are robbing each other, we're going to find out which of those things actually were practical. And then people are not going to be so willing to share anymore because they want to have the cutting edge technique, because now it's about survival.
Yeah, and it's like that saying, hard times make strong men, good times make weak men.
Weak men make shit time, or
yeah,
bad times make, yeah, it's a cycle.
Right, and that is a legitimate sociological cycle.
Truth is not fixed. Truth is fixed in time. It's
Yeah.
not fixed in time, rather.
But sorry, you were going to say something?
No. I was about to say, yeah, it's a cycle that has been going on for forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're in the weak times now.
Yeah. Well, we'll be out of that soon.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hey, I don't want to be the prophet of doom or anything like that. But, yeah, we're trying to navigate the whole social landscape in terms of trauma right now, because we know that is one of those big things that's going on. The crisis is like the mental health crisis is real. It's there, and that's why we're here. We want to help people, and if we can do that through T4T, CS, let's do it, and that's what we're here for. So, hopefully, you guys like the show. Remember, we'll be releasing some articles on it too, go in a little bit more detail. Added some book references and stuff like that to the website, so feel free to go to t4tcs.ca and take a look at it right at the bottom of the page. We'll plug in the Dark Triad. I think you wanted to give another shout out to, what was his name, to see if we can get him
Through
on?
Dave Edwards of Bully Be Gone. Check him out. I'm not sure what his website is, but maybe I'll get that to you after you can pin it.
Yeah.
But Bully Be Gone. And also, we have a women's self-defense coming up on October 19th, where we'll be teaching, awareness, some stats, some education on paying attention to your environment, how you can prevent yourself from being a target, as well as the physical education and psychological and trauma education. If anybody is interested in that, any females in your lives are interested for that, details will be on the website.
Yep.
Later date. So look forward to that.
Yep, and then just a heads up, the person we were talking about as a guest coming up next month, his name is Carl Legault. He's a psychotherapist. He's one of the professors at Durham College. He's got his own private practice. He specializes in trauma and somatic healing, but also in addictions. So he's going to be one of our special guests on the show coming up in September. So that's going to be an awesome one. So stay tuned for that. I don't know if there's any other announcements. I think that's it for now.
So that's it for now. Yeah.
We've got some other projects in the works, but we're not going to give you any of that information just yet. So,
That's right.
okay. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.